We gotta crack open a Diet Coke for this one. And of course, the cats have decided that now is the perfect time for them to start treating my filming room like a playground. Hi friends, it's Lexa, and once again, we're back at it. It is time to talk about the best books that I read this year. And I am extra excited for this video because this is actually the first video I filmed and I believe uploaded. It was either favorites or worst books on this channel ever last year. And I did it a little bit late because in the month of January, I decided that I wanted to join BookTube. I do social media for a living, something completely different. I do personal finance content, and I was just feeling a little bit burnt out, and I loved reading, and I wanted to share that joy and to have like a positive association with social media. You didn't ask any of this, but now you know. And I'm so excited to talk about what my year of reading in 2023 looked like. So I have some like quote unquote honorable mentions, and then I have what I am calling my definitive ranked top 10 best books of the year. But listen, okay, this could change at any point in time. If you ask me tomorrow and I change my mind, or I said it in a different order, listen, I cannot be held responsible for the person that I am tomorrow. I can only be held responsible for the person that I am literally right now, because I was literally switching it up like right before I turned the camera on. And this is where all of these books stand. Just knowing that aside from a few absolutely incredible standouts that we will get into, I do think that some of these could be moved around if you caught me on a different day with a different vibe. But today, we have the hot pink shirt on. I am so ready to film and talk about these, so let's get into it, starting off with our honorable mentions for the best books of 2023. As it works out, if you watched my video on reading the top 10 Goodreads Choice Awards books in the horror category, 2 of those books have made it into this honorable mentions category that I literally just read. The first one of those so serendipitously works out as Our Share of Night, and the reason that this works out perfectly is because I thought I returned all of these library books. Counting them up, I was like, I borrowed 13, I have 13 books here, let's go return all of these. Then, today, I get a text message from the library that says, hey, bestie, you have a book due. And I was like, what are you talking about? I returned all of those books. And they were like, no, you did not. No, you did not, bestie. So I was like, which one? And they were like, literally the biggest one, the one that's hardest to miss, the one that you loved so much, Our Share of Night. And I was panicked thinking that I didn't know where this was, but I found it. All is well, and it works out perfectly because I now still have a physical copy to show and hold up to you and talk about. Our Share of Night is a translated work. It is the longest horror book that I've ever read. I think it's like almost 600 pages, if not more than 600 pages. And this is told from a few different points of view, but mainly it is following the dynamics between a father and a son after the mom/wife passes away. Her and her family were possibly involved in some culty supernatural things that the dad knows about and is kind of trying to keep his son protected from, while also knowing that like they still have to converse with the family, because for whatever reason his son is starting to show signs that like maybe he has some powers, maybe he's seeing things, maybe he's more like his dad than the dad would like to admit. And he knows that that really puts him in danger for like more powerful people wanting to use him the way that possibly it seems like his wife's family was using Gaspar. One's the dad, one's the kid. Gaspar is the son, Juan is the dad. This did not go in the direction that I thought it was going to go. It moved slower, like the plot of it is slower, which I would think for such a long book would be an issue. But when I tell you this book earned every single one of its 580 some pages, I truly mean that. I am a big proponent that I think that a lot of books are overwritten and under-edited right now, and they are way too long. And I thought that this would definitely be that case. I haven't read a book this long that isn't like a fantasy book. Every single minute of this I absolutely loved. I listened to the audiobook, 12 out of 10 recommend. It is slow, but it's because it is exploring like these family dynamics. It is really a character study with this background of horror, and there are definite supernatural, culty, magic-y kind of horror elements into this. Did that tell you at all what this plot is? Not really, but I feel like it's better to just go into it. I can understand why people DNF'd this because it is big, it can be daunting, and it does move slower than you would expect for like what the premise is kind of set up to be. This takes place, I believe, in like the 1960s, but it does move throughout Gaspar's life a little bit. I just absolutely loved this, and it really took me aback. I was not expecting, this was the one that I was like most scared to read because I thought that it was going to be a little bit overwhelming. Wonderful, incredible. We'll talk about another book on this list that I think is kind of similar to this one, but I don't want to give that away. So remind me. You'll remind me to come back to that, okay? Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. Wonderful. So glad that I was forced to read it because I don't think, not forced, but I don't think I would have read it on my own. So it worked out perfectly that I did. The next book that I also read quickly in that same vlog is Vampires of El Norte, and this is another one that I feel like could also go if I was making a video of most surprising books. It would be this one. But had you told me going into it that it was more love story and romance focused than I'm used to reading in horror, that probably would have made me a little nervous. Because if you know me, you know romance doesn't usually go all that well for me, even though I desperately want it to. But this gave me a little bit of hope because I was sold on the romance in here from like page 8, and I didn't even know that that was the vibes going into this. So in this, we're following Nena and Nestor as we start off when they're like 12, 13-ish, and they have this friendship that could be something more. They're starting to feel like it could be something more. It's like they're each other's person growing up. And Nena's dad owns this like plot of land on this ranch. And one night they're walking about, they see this like light that they've heard legends of, and Nestor's like, let's go check it out. Starts digging it up, and then what pops out? This like monster creature thing that attacks Nena, and Nestor is able to like save Nena, but what he thinks is not in time because he takes her back and she is appearing very much not alive. Blue lips, not breathing, cold skin. So he, fearing the wrath of her father, is like, I've got to get out of here. Like, Nena is dead. I'm gonna be dead if I don't leave. Out. But Nena is not dead. There has been this like sickness going around that the townspeople don't really know what it's caused by, but like we know what it's caused by, as you can assume from the title here. She wakes up and Nestor's gone. And she's like, what the fuck? Some years in the future, they're in their 20s, flash forward, he's been just kind of hopping from ranch to ranch, not ever settling down because he is still grieving the loss of Nena because he thinks that she is on this ranch thinking that Nestor just left because she doesn't remember anything and no one wants to talk about what happened to her. Something happens that brings him back to this ranch and they're going to have to start fighting in this war, and it doesn't quite go as they're expecting because obviously they were on 2 completely different pages, and it's like, how do we reconcile how important you were to me, but like also grieving that time that we lost that we'll never get back, and Nestor having to grieve like the decisions he made when he was just a child. That reminds me that for some of these, since this is my best books of the year and I am nothing if not a quote girly, I want to read you like some of my favorite quotes, keeping in mind that I am reading quotes that aren't going to give anything away, but will hopefully help you get the vibe because I love characters and writing and vibes, and quotes just encompass that so well. This says, his voice was like coming home. It loosened the unease that had curled in her chest all week. And one more because I couldn't choose between these 2. It made her want to shed her skin like the witch in Abuela's story. Let everything that made her a woman fall to the ground to be salted and ruined as she flew into the night, her bones bare and cold in the starlight. I love this writing. Cannot wait to read more from Isabel Cañas. We all should know by now, if you've been on my channel before, that I over-explain, I over-talk. It's what we're here for, right? I always feel like as a viewer, I came wanting to hear people talk about books. So here we are. Then earlier in the year, I don't have a physical copy of this because I borrowed it from the library, I read You Should Have Left by Danielle Kenlin. This took me by surprise. It is a little horror novella about this family that ends up going on a vacation, staying in this Airbnb, I think maybe in Virginia, Vermont, somewhere like that. Things are just like feeling a little bit weird in the house, especially from the husband's perspective. It's the husband, wife, and their daughter. This is told in passages that like the husband is writing in his journal, and he's also a writer for like a TV sitcom. So you're getting like interspliced with like his thoughts about like the marriage issues that he's having, what they're doing on vacation, the weird things he's discovering about the town and the house, and also then like script ideas for the show that he's supposed to be writing and that he like told his manager he was gonna have for him, and he definitely does not. He like goes into the town to get some supplies, and the people down there are like, oh, you're staying there? Yeah, we don't talk about that. Some sketch things happen there. And he's like, what do you mean? And they're like, no, sorry friend, no bestie, I will not be talking about that. This was also apparently made into a movie that I really want to see, but I haven't watched it yet. I ate this up. Such a quick read, so weird. I can understand if you don't like the feeling of reading journal entries, and it really felt like that. Like sometimes it would cut off mid-sentence or mid-word, and then it would be like the next day. That this would feel kind of disjointed and weird, but I thought that was so brilliantly done because you felt like what the characters were feeling in that moment. I loved the way that it ended, was not expecting it. I don't feel like there's anything else I can say about the plot or the vibes without giving it away since it's such a short novella, but if you are wanting something quick to read if you're in a reading slump, or you just need a quick win and you like a little bit of weird horror, hello. Check it out. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This is an interesting one in the sense that one of the books from the series is ending up on like my favorites, best of the year, and one is ending up on like my worst / disappointing books of the year. So I can't even like put this as the full series. I am specifically talking about the first book, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I honestly was not expecting to love this as much as I did because I was starting to realize around this time that YA mystery / thriller books weren't really working for me. But I'd heard such amazing things about this and I wanted something that was quick to get through, and I was really, oh my God, that was during the time that I lost all of the data on my laptop. Not data, but like all of my storage on my laptop, all of my videos and everything. Not a good time, besties. But I was filming that vlog while I was getting everything situated with that, and I was like on hold with tech support for like 6 to 8 hours at a time. This first book absolutely blew me away. I was hooked from the very beginning. Before I even tell you what this is about, let me tell you, if you have the choice between an audiobook and a physical copy of this, it's so hard for me to choose. I want to say both because there's mixed media elements in this that are so cool to visually look at, but also the audiobook is so well done. And even in the parts, like she is doing interviews, the parts of the interviews that like would sound like a recording actually sound like a recording on the audiobook. Just incredible. But our main girl, Pip, she for a class assignment is really interested in this like true crime local case of this girl, Andy Bell, who had gone missing like a few years before, and it was presumed that her boyfriend, Sal, had killed her or done something with her and then unalived himself. And she is just not buying it. She's not fully convinced. There were some plot holes, some decisions made in the detective work, some shocking racism from the police department. Who would have guessed? It pulled me in. There were so many twists. Something that I don't like to categorize like all of YA because YA is just so vast and different and can like encompass so many different things. But I was finding that in a lot of YA mystery thriller books I was reading, I've just read so many mystery thriller books in general that it was really easy for me to guess kind of where the plot was going. And that sometimes the plot like almost in some ways moved too quickly for me, especially since I'm more of like a character-based girly than a plot girly. And this was a great balance of really feeling invested in the characters, in the story, in Pip, in her journey to figure this out, while also having so many twists and red herrings and things that circled back that you weren't thinking about and that even like later in the series do. And I just absolutely love this. I have some beef with the third book, but this could be just read as a standalone too, which is why I really like it. You can go on to read the rest of the series, but you don't have to. So if you don't want to make that big of a commitment and you're just looking for a quick, like, this is get out of a reading slump, this is it. And actually the reason I don't even have the physical copy of this, I have the second and third book right now, is because I gave the physical copy to my friend to read it, who ended up absolutely loving it too. And now I just feel like I need to keep giving it to people. Then we have Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. This is, again, a book I could put on a most surprising list, mainly because I thought that this was horror. It's not horror. Really a dissection of grief and healing from grief and trauma and healing around, like kind of a collective healing, like finding your people when you feel so alone and how those people can help you to discover who you are and to heal from the trauma that you've been through. And also, this cover, stunning. Then you flip it, excuse me, absolutely love. Maybe this is what made me think it was a little bit horror. So I even read like a quarter, maybe even to half of this book being like, okay, our main girl, she just aged out of the foster care system. She's going to work on this like farm type thing. And I'm thinking, I'm in the mind of, no bestie, don't go do that. No, that's not what happened at all. Let me just read you a little bit of this first part of the synopsis as someone who doesn't typically like to read synopsis. Mila is used to being alone. Maybe that's why she said yes. Yes to a second chance in this remote place among the flowers and the fog and the crash of waves far below. But she hadn't known about the ghosts. So she ends up going to stay and teach on this farm where these two people kind of like half adopt, half take care of, half invite kids who have aged out of the foster care system to come live with them and just have a place to like live and work and stay and heal and love together. I marked here at the end all of the pages that made me cry back to back 3 times. 3 times, sobbed. And now I want to reread this. It's such a short read. If you just need a little bit of healing, this is the book for you. Well, it might not be the book for you, but it was definitely the book for me. This next one I thought about not putting on this list, not because I didn't love it, and actually I might have even put it in my top 10, but because I'm pretty sure it's out of print, or it was like a limited print edition, and that you can really only get this on like maybe audiobook and Kindle. And I only got my hands on it because I was lucky enough that my library had one of the limited edition copies of it. And that is Final Girls by Mira Grant. Now, Mira Grant is also Sean McGuire. who's one of my favorite authors of all time. And in the vlog that I was reading a bunch of horror novellas, I picked this up because I saw Mira Grant and I was like, oh girl, I love you. And I, again, ate this up. It was not as horror as, a little bit horror, more sci-fi. So this is, I believe, set in our world just a little bit in the future, where this psychologist, science person comes up with this new technology to heal trauma through this machine that you connect to, that it makes you feel like you are living out these horrific nightmare-like events, but then you like come out of it the other side like having been healed, and it's like seeming to work for the people who are trying it. And then we're following our main character Esther, who is a journalist who's like, okay, I don't believe this shit. I know that like you can fool people into like, you can implant memories into people really easily, especially in like a therapy setting. And I feel like this is bullshit and I'm gonna go find it out. So she's going to go through this process and document what it's like. But then it doesn't quite go how she is expecting. And the twists and turns in this book were so fun. I just absolutely loved this. It is weird. It is Shauna Maguire's weird horror sci-fi, you don't always know what's going on, but weird things are happening kind of vibes. So if you can get your hands on this novella, I would recommend it, but don't worry about it if you can't. Because right now on Amazon, it's going for $133. That's not gonna happen, friends. But I am so thankful that my library has that. How cool. No one better steal it. And last but not least, in our area of honorable mentions, and I have been filming for like 30 minutes, fantastic, is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I will admit, this was the one that I was going back and forth on, and if you asked me at a different time, might actually make my top 10. But I'm feeling good about where it's at right now. If V. Schwab's gonna work for me, it's gonna be this. And then I saw this like absolutely gorgeous Barnes & Noble edition. Barnes & Noble is finally getting me. You'll see another Barnes & Noble special edition on here. I was not buying physical books from there for a while, and now they've finally gotten smart and on the board of like, maybe we should be making special editions of books, and it's hard to resist a different special edition of my favorite books. And since I've been reading more on my Kindle and not reading physically as much, I then feel like I can invest a little bit more in buying hard copies of books that I know that I love. Listen, it's working for me. I've seen this sold as like a love story between a girl who can never be remembered and death. Is it death? Well, it's not death. But like or like a dark god. I wouldn't really say that's what this is. It's also sold as a story of a girl who's cursed to never be remembered, and then the boy who does remember her. Kind of, but not really. We don't really even get to that point of the book until like literally almost halfway. It's really just journal entries from this girl who is living in like what? How far back does this go? The 1700s? Where she is about to be married off and she's like, I don't want that. I just want to be able to be free. And she's been told to not pray to the gods after dark. But then through a series of unfortunate events on her wedding night, she ends up praying to a god that answers after dark. And she's like, well, fuck it. This is my last hope. Let's make a deal. And the deal that she makes with this dark god demon thing basically curses her to live as long as she wants, but no one can remember her. And what that looks like, because when no one can remember you, how are you supposed to have a home or a job? Obviously, like things like friends and family and those things are difficult, but like you can't have a job when your employer isn't gonna remember you the second that you walk out of the door. And the way this works is like she walks out the door, you lose sight of her, lost her memory, you forget about her. So she is trying to navigate the world, trying to survive, but then also trying to find the meaning of like what her life is like and making connections in whatever way that she can and coming to terms with what this curse kind of means for her. And then she does end up meeting a guy in a New York bookstore that does remember her. And she's like, this can't happen. So why is it happening now? Why after all of these years? And it's like modern day kind of, like 2014, I think. So why after like 300 years is sudden, no one's remembered me, so why do you? The writing in this, listen, characters, vibes, writing. And it had all three for me. A little quote from this book. But this is how you walk to the end of the world. This is how you live forever. Here's one day, and here's the next, and the next. And you take what you can, savor every stolen second, cling to every moment until it's gone. Oh, V.E. Schwab, I just eat that shit up. So without further ado, my top 10 of the year, counting backward, number 10. And that is The Marrow, Thieves by Cherie Demeline. I sought out this cover after I already read the book using my Libby app on my Kindle, and also, what is this? Audiobook, not in my head. I did read it in my head, but I read it on audio. And this is not post-apocalyptic, but kind of dystopian in our world, a little bit in the future, where people all of a sudden stop dreaming. and it drives them mad. In their desperation to be able to dream again, they find out that Native American people can dream, and therefore they start harvesting the marrow of Native American people in order to get this like cure to dream again. I think what kind of started this is like a global warming natural disaster event that kind of started this apocalyptic feeling we're getting from the world and where it's at. And then you put all of this on top of that. And our main character, Frenchie, is just trying to survive. He's lost his, like, a lot of his family and is trying to find his place, figuring out who he can trust and what is going on and if he can get his family back and how to find connection and meaning in this world when there is so much darkness. I cried, I laughed, I sobbed. The ending, it was like a roller coaster of emotions for me. And I have seen a lot of critiques, like not a lot, but the critiques that I have seen in like the reviews of this book is that like you do have to suspend some disbelief because the exact science behind this doesn't really matter. The idea of like why dream, like not being able to dream would drive people crazy doesn't really matter. Like that's not the point of this book. The point is to be a huge metaphor, and not even a metaphor for like how we're treating Indigenous Native American people right now, but how we have in the past. This is drawing parallels to like the residential schools that they had in Canada. So this is a metaphor, but it's also like not far off from how white people and people in power have already been treating Native American and Indigenous people. I'm already so excited to go back through and reread and tab this. I'm in my reread era right now since it's the end of the year, and this is one that I want to get to because the writing in this is just beautiful and incredible, and the way that it depicts love and grief and collectivism, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Out here, stars were perforations revealing the bleached skeleton of the universe through a collection of tiny holes. So good. Then I believe that this is actually the only one of my top 10 books that I don't have a physical copy of right now. I need to correct that, but I also would really like to wait for the paperback to come out. Either way, doesn't matter. Number 9 is Monstruo by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This took me so much by surprise. This is literary horror. Again, I feel like a lot of themes that we're seeing here is horror that talks about family dynamics and grief, but this also talks about queerness and love and what it means to love someone and love in all of its different forms. But this is following 2 grieving parents whose son just recently died and he was like 7 years old. And during her grief, Magos, the mom, ends up cutting out a piece of Santiago's lung and keeping it in a little jar. And then her and her husband are really struggling because they're just like expressing their grief in different ways and trying to figure out how to move forward in their life and in their relationship now that they've lost their son. So she's originally from Mexico. She decides to go back and visit there and live with her mom for a while. Takes this little piece of Santiago's lung with her. And then here's this folktale that ends up giving her the idea that maybe if she just like fed this a little bit, something magical might happen. And in her grief, she does. And then it doesn't bring her son back, but it does start growing into this little creature, Monstruo. And you would think that, like, I heard a premise like that and I thought, okay, this is gonna be about, like, the horror part of this is going to be about Monstruo, this little monster that they've created from the lung of their dead son. But that's not it. It's told in different different points of view. Monstruo is trying to live up to the fact that he's being compared and in some ways kind of being the replacement for Santiago in some of their lives, and what that like love looks like with the elements of like every main character in the story is queer, and we talk about that queerness. And there is a scene in this book, a depiction of grief I can see so clearly in my mind and will probably stay with me forever. It was so, like, I had like take a moment. I could feel it in the grief and like what all of the other characters were feeling. Whoa. So beautiful, so incredibly well done. And this is a debut author. Are you fucking kidding me? I cannot wait to read more. Number 8 is A Dowry of Blood by S.D. Gibson. First off, I am so excited that I have this absolutely gorgeous copy of it. Stop it, please. Second off, like, I knew I was probably going to love this. It is a Dracula retelling, but from the point of view of one of his wives. The letter she's writing to Dracula about their life and why she killed him. And it's poly and queer and depicts abusive relationships. And honestly, I don't know what else to say about this other than I just absolutely loved every minute of it. And it is a lot quicker to get through than you would think because it's written in these like short letter entry things. So sometimes a page only looks like this. I think I sat down at my desk and read this in a day. And I have a quote that I had picked out from Goodreads that I want to read you, but I just happened to flip to a page that I don't know why I didn't tab these, but I guess I just like literally highlighted and underlined. Yeah, I just underlined in pencil because I think I didn't want to get up and stop reading. This says, I think, my lord, that this is when you loved me best, when I was freshly made and still as malleable as wet clay in your hands. And if you are someone who has ever been in an emotionally abusive relationship, so much of this is going to resonate. I think, at least obviously I can't speak for everyone, but so much of it resonated with me. And it was like this author was just like putting words to things that I had felt for so long that it was like so healing for me to see it done. And that is what I like love so much about horror books and why there are so many horror books on my list. There are a lot of horror books on my list this year. It's like pretty much nothing but horror and fantasy. Sounds about right. Because I just feel like this is a genre that explores that so well. I loved you too much, my lord. I craved you like maidens crave the grave, the way death burns for human touch, inconsolably, unrelentingly, aching for the annihilation in your kiss. I had no practice saying no to you. In that moment, I couldn't have predicted what would happen next. You could have kissed me or slit my throat, and either would have made as much sense. I could literally sit here just reading all of these quotes to you that I underlined all day. Oh my God, I'm sorry, I have to read you one more. Vienna made you irritable as much as it made me blossom. I wouldn't realize until later that you were irritable precisely because I was in bloom. Because there was suddenly so many sources of joy in my life apart from your presence. These quotes are making me feel like this could, at any point in time, definitely be moved up this list. But all of these are just so good. I feel this way about all of them. Number 7 was another shocking twist of events, and that's Leave the World Behind. I was honestly not expecting to like this. I ended up reading this last minute for a vlog that I was doing. I was in the middle of reading like some of Kayla's favorite books, and I wanted to read one that specifically I read because of her recommendation, because we have so much in common with our reading. And I thought that this was going to be a book that she loved that I wouldn't like. I thought this was gonna fall in that little percentage of horror that works for her and definitely does not work for me. And then she compared this to, I think, The Cabin at the End of the World and maybe Bunny or one other book that I really loved that I was like, okay, maybe I could like this. And it is following a family who goes to stay at this Airbnb. And then while they're there, the owners of the Airbnb come knocking on the front door. And they're like, hey, something is happening. Maybe the world is ending. We're not really sure, but we need to stay here. So it's like an end of the world possibly story, but you're not seeing the end of the world. You are just following these two families trying to coexist in this Airbnb. And the entire time you're thinking like, why would I give a shit about this when I want to know what the fuck is going on out there? And if there even really is anything going on out there, because something weird is happening, but like, we don't really know what. And are these people telling the truth? None of these characters are really likable, and you're spending time on things that you don't think that you should be spending time on. I just absolutely love this, and I'm pretty sure that there's now a movie, a Netflix adaptation of this, but I don't know if it's like a close adaptation or if it's just based on that kind of premise and vibes. I do think that if you liked The Cabin at the End of the World, this could be your vibe, but just know it's even less action-packed than that. And most people's complaint is that like nothing happens in that book and it's kind of pointless. And this is even less so than that, but it was fucking weird and I loved it. And now I'm gonna combine number 6 and number 5 because they're by the same author. And last year, I believe that I had a rule to myself. I just like arbitrarily made up the rule that I couldn't have more than one book on this list that was by the same author. Like I needed to pick one. I did not abide by that rule this year. I actually broke that rule twice and I'm feeling good about it. And that is Alone with You in the Ether and The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. This is the special edition from Barnes & Noble that I just picked up despite already having the regular one right there. I understand why people don't love Olivia Blake and think that her writing is pretentious. Yes. Think that nothing happens in her books. Yes. Think that the characters are generally unlikable. Yep, you're right. And I eat up every moment of like every book of hers that I read. I also read 2 other books, one for my enemy and Masters of Death, which I think I gave like 4.5 stars. They weren't as standout to me as these 2 were. This was like, especially this one was unexpected because Alone with You in the Ether, I thought was fantasy because that's all I'd ever read from Olivia Blake, and it is not. It is what it says, a love story here. And it is a love story in a way that works for me in the way that traditional romance I think doesn't, because it feels just a little bit more real. And maybe it's because the characters are unlikable and they're not always making decisions that you agree with, but somehow you still find that like yourself rooting for them. On top of, if there is one thing that Olivia Blake can do, it's write. Like the prose, oh my God. Listen, if you were a Fault in Our Stars girly, that kind of vibe where you just like wanted to read and highlight pretty love quotes, I think that you could really like Alone with You in the Ether. This is another book that I feel like I could just sit here. I don't have the copy I originally read and annotated because I gave it to my mom. This is the second copy of this book that I have. And if I had that one, I feel like this is another one I could get into the trap of just sitting here reading quotes that I love that I highlighted from this one, because that's how I originally gave it to my mom, as we sat at first watch as I just read all of the highlights from the book to her. I don't think that the plots of her books matter as much as really anything else other than if you like Olivia Blake, you either really like that writing or you don't. But let me just give you a quick little synopsis so you know even what I'm talking about here. This is following two people who end up meeting in like an art museum and deciding to have 5 more conversations with each other. And they're kind of love story, kind of not, kind of romance, kind of not. And they're both struggling with mental illness. They both have their own shit to deal with. But the way that they end up falling into each other's orbit and how that is described is just so beautiful. They could not be more opposite, but is that what makes them such a good fit for each other? I would argue maybe so. She is in all of his spaces and all of his thoughts. He contemplates formulas and degrees of rationality, and they all turn into her. He thinks about time, which has only recently begun, or at least now feels different. He thinks, the Babylonians were wrong. Time is made of her. If this is what it is to burn, he thought, then I will be worth more as scattered ash than any of my unscathed pieces. Olivia Blake, stop it. And then The Atlas Paradox. This is the second book in the series. The Atlas 6 is the first one. I read that one. I think I gave it 4 stars, knowing that this is definitely a series that I think that the rest, hopefully, as it stands now, the rest of the books in the series will hopefully be 5 stars, and then rereading the first book would make it a 5-star for me. And that is saying a lot because that's exactly what happened with me and Mistborn. Mistborn is like one of my favorite series of all time. The first book I gave 4 stars the first time I read it. I just reread it, 5 stars, absolutely incredible. And I knew it would be. And it was kind of even like, as I read more books in the series, the first book became a 5-star in my mind. And I think that's what's happened with this one. This is sold as people going, and there's like the Library of Alexandria burned down, but not really. That was just a ruse. It's actually just this like magical library that now people who have magical powers have to protect. And it's set in our world, but in our world where magic is real and like some people have it and some people don't. And we're following the people who are competing for a spot for the Alexandrian Society where they could be the protectors of this information. But like, you never see the library. It's kind of more of a concept, really. Nothing really happens until the last like 20 or 30 pages. You don't really know why you're here. You're just watching a bunch of pretentious, unlikable people interacting in a house together. It kind of feels like reality TV in a way because of that reason, but it's queer. And I love it, and the writing is just incredible. And there is a little bit more plot, I would say, in the Atlas Paradox, but I loved this even more than the Atlas 6, and it just reinforced how much I absolutely love these characters and their dynamics. Plus, one of the characters in here gets like a little bit of a, not a villain arc, but like a I'm done taking your fucking shit arc. And I'm here for it. This was just the world. You trusted people, you loved them, you offered them the dignity of your time and the intimacy of your thoughts and the frailty of your hope. And they either accepted it and cared for it, or they rejected it and destroyed it. And in the end, none of it was up to you. This was just what you got. Heartbreak was inevitable, disappointment assured. My angsty heart is obsessed. I'm calling number 4 this series, which I said the 5th season, but it's not. It's called the Broken Earth trilogy. I think out of the 3 of these, the second one was actually my favorite, which is weird because normally in a trilogy, the second book can kind of fall into like second book syndrome where it's just a lot of like drawn out trying to get us from where we were at in book 1 to where we need to get in book 3. And some people I've seen think that this book falls into that, but I just thought it was so well done. And honestly, so was the 5th season. Like, this was incredible. I didn't love the 3rd book as much as I wanted to, but I do think that maybe upon reread I could. But like, look at this. I read and tabbed. The light, I feel like, is gonna make it hard to see this because they're such different colors, but like every single one of these, and this is stuck. I gasped. I cried. Oh, I sobbed throughout this series. What is it about? Good question. It's kind of fantasy, kind of post-apocalyptic, sci-fi-ish, where we are following people in this world where there's this 5th season that comes around every once in a while that basically like looks different every time, but it destroys the world. And they're trying to figure out, like, their entire society is set up to survive these times of crisis. And everything about how their society is structured and run and governed is around that. And there's this group of people who have powers that they can kind of like harness the powers of the earth that are needed in order for everyone to survive, but they're also really feared. And the way that society goes about trying to control them based on that fear of them. And we're following different perspectives in here. One of them is of a mother whose son just died and her husband just stole her daughter away from her. And she's having to go on this quest to find her daughter at the start of this 5th season. And I just think that the less that you know about this plot, despite it being a 3-book series in a fantasy series, is just better. Just know that N.K. Jemisin is absolutely wonderful and incredible, and the world, the way that this is told, everything about this, 5 stars. Loved. It says, this is the way the world ends for the last time. And I am just so glad that I read this. And I can't believe that it still sticks so clearly in my mind, despite it being almost a year since I've read it. Number 3, I have been teasing, going back and forth about how I was gonna rank these for a little bit now. But I think that has to be Rouge by Mona Awad. I am in my Mona Awad era, as you will see. I was thinking that possibly this beat out like the other Mona Awad book that I read, but I think where I've settled now, that I do know that this is an unpopular opinion, that this even came close to Mona Awad's other book, but I loved this so much. This feels very much like a fever dream. If you know of anything of Mona Awad's writing, it is very, what the hell is going on here? Weird writing. You literally are just like, what the fuck? But she also says so much and has like a very clear intention of the themes that she's covering in the books that she's writing, with this backdrop of fever dreamy, like hazy horror elements. And Rouge is tackling that through our main character, who is obsessed with skincare and looking youthful and maintaining her youth. And her mom was very similar, but then her mom, she gets a call, her mom has passed away unexpectedly. She has to go back to California to take care of everything, the funeral, and also just like everything that her mom owned. And she's starting to realize that like within the last few years, there was a lot going on with her mom that she had no idea about. And like she's like, do I even know who this woman was? What kind of decisions she was making? What headspace was she in? She seems to have been involved in some weird things. Then this woman shows up on the beach at her mom's funeral with like a weird coded message about like possibly knowing why her mom died or what happened to her mom. And then she gets sucked into this fever dreamy culty mess. It has a lot of conversations around family trauma and grief and the beauty industry and how Eurocentric it is and how we value youth and the means we will go to achieve that. And she is just kind of, our main character is slowly losing touch with reality, and we are witnessing that, and the writing kind of reflects that. But not a lot of people who loved Bunny also loved this. And definitely not nearly as much to put at number 3 on the best books that they read this year. And I didn't know anyone's opinions about this until I was done reading it. And I got done reading it and I was like, oh my God, like the bunny girlies are gonna eat this up. And then a lot of them didn't. And I was like, I'm confused. But I get it in the sense that this does have, like, this is a cleaner ending than Bunny is. It is a little bit more clear and in your face about the themes and what it's trying to say. And it almost does in a way kind of feel like she was trying to make a book that was a little bit more accessible to people. And typically I wouldn't like that because I loved Bunny because of its inaccessibility and weirdness. But this just felt like the perfect amount of weirdness too. And I loved it. And I'm so excited that I finally have a physical copy of it, because if you watched my Goodreads vlog, you might have seen that I did not have a copy of it, despite it being my favorite horror book of the year from that list of 2023 releases. But then of course, my number 2 favorite book of the year is Bunny by Mona Awad. It seems like I have a theme of like books, if I had more than one book from an author, them being back to back on this list. But really what this is my favorite standalone of the year, hands down. And I knew it when I read it. I tabbed it as I read it. I was obsessed from page 1. I think that the less you know about this, the better. Chances are you've probably heard of it before. I always just describe it to people as a weird horror where you're gonna know within the first probably 50 pages if you fuck with this kind of writing or not. It starts off following this group of sorority girls who all refer to themselves as Bunny. It literally says, we call them bunnies because that is what they call each other. Seriously, Bunny. Example. Hi, Bunny. Hi, Bunny. What did you do last night, Bunny? I hung out with you, Bunny. Remember, Bunny? That's right, Bunny. You hung out with me and it was the best time I ever had. Bunny, I love you. I love you, Bunny. But it does not go in the way that you're gonna be expecting at all. I had one of my best friends DNF this, didn't like it. Then I was like, well, do you want to know what happens? Are you ever gonna read it? And then I told her and she was like, oh, maybe I should read it. And I was like, listen, I'm just saying. It goes there. It picks up about halfway through when you start realizing what is happening in this plot and you're like, excuse me? And then you think you know what's happening. And then Mona Awad's like, oh, did I mention this? And you're like, excuse me? But our main character ends up receiving an invitation from the bunnies to join their smut salon. And everything kind of spirals from there, and I am absolutely obsessed. And oh my god, look, I didn't even plan this, but look at how good my shirt goes with this cover. I'm a bunny girly, through and through, favorite standalone of the year. But ultimately, number 2 on this list because I couldn't possibly imagine putting number 1 at any place other than number 1. It is my favorite book of the year, but really my favorite series of the year, and possibly what I probably could say my favorite series of all time. And that is none other than The Raven Cycle. Oh my god. Okay, so this started what could be known as the summer of slumps, where I went like 3 months not having a 5-star read, which is very impressive considering I think like 6 of the books on this list came after that slump, when I was convinced that I might never love a book again because I loved these books so much. They put me in a huge reading slump, but I say that in the best way possible. It's so hard to tell people about these books because when I tell you the synopsis of it, it doesn't sound like something I'd want to read, and it doesn't sound like something that would become so quickly and unexpectedly an all-time favorite series of mine. It's following Blue, who is our main character, and she lives with a bunch of women who, the word escapes me, they're like clairvoyant, vaguely, usually. She's always gotten the same messages, and that is if she were to kiss the person that she loves, they die. And she's like, well, that's really unfortunate. Great, love that for me. And then in come the Raven Boys. And that is this group of boys who go to Aglenby, the local private school. They're the last like group of people that Blue ever thinks that she's gonna get caught up in. But then through a series of events, she does. And one of the boys is like chasing ley lines in this dead king. We have unexpected elements that made me absolutely fall in love with the series and with the characters. And this is like lightly fantasy. It's told in our world, and there are magical elements to this, but it's not high fantasy. It's more of a friendship story and beautiful writing and just so fucking good. And honestly, I am so glad that Kayla loved this. Like, this is Kayla from Books and Lala's favorite series of all time. And that is the only reason that I read this, because the synopsis, I was like, I don't get it. This just doesn't sound like something Kayla would love that much that she rereads it every year. I'm not understanding. And that was the only reason I even powered through it. I almost DNF'd it and like just didn't do the vlog that I was planning where I was reading all of these books because I was having a hard time to keeping up with who all of the characters were because I'm really bad with names. And I am so glad that I kept going because, oh my fucking god. I have, like, the pages of these books are literally falling apart because the, like, glue that binds the pages in is, like, literally melting. Ronan, I think, is my favorite character and one of the best written characters ever that I've ever read. And I have so many pages that are just, like, highlighted, underlined, where I wrote in them. My best friend came over while I was doing a bunch of my laundry and picked up these books and just like started reading the places that I had highlighted and the quotes that I had written, and was just like, she was even telling me, I feel like I've learned so much about you and I see so much of you in the comments that you've made and what you've highlighted and written. And she was absolutely obsessed with this. And I will cherish this series for forever. It took me so long to even finish the last book because I just kept crying every 3 pages when I would pick it up because I was so sad that it was going to end and I knew I was never going to be able to read this series for the first time ever again. And let me just read you a little quote. There's so many, okay? But there's also a lot that give things away. So this is like one of my favorites that also doesn't give away any of the plot. She recognized the strange happiness that came from loving something without knowing why you did. The strange happiness that was sometimes so big that it felt like sadness. It was the way she felt when she looked at the stars. Girl, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So wow, okay, after like an hour and a half, I think, of me recording, we finally have broken down my top books of 2023. Thank you all so much for watching. This was incredible. This made me so happy going back through. I was a little bit scared, especially after that like summer of slumps, that reading just wasn't gonna feel the same way for me as it used to. And I think it's just that I'm in a transition era with the kinds of books that I am enjoying and the way that I'm enjoying them and the pace that I'm reading. And I'm coming to terms with that. And this just like brought so much joy to my heart to be able to talk about these books that I love so much. Let me know down in the comments below if you loved any of these, what your favorite books were. Leave a little bird emoji if you made it all the way to the end of this video in honor of our Raven boys, and I will see y'all next time.